Greetings, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland. So here I am in Chelsea, London, on Mallard Street, as in the duck. And behind me is a house built for Augustus John, the celebrated artist. I'm not quite sure when it was built. It looks quite mid-20th century to me. And some of the street is 19th century. Why is there a space here? I'm always wondering if this is where the bomb fell. So it's a very plush area. So Augustus John, he was born in Tenby, that's a small town in Pembrokeshire. He grew up in Wales, though he was English on his mother's side. She's from Sussex, and his father was a well-to-do solicitor, one of the most prominent people in that small town. So Augustus John wasn't that academic, but was an artistic prodigy. And he came to the Slade School of Art here in London, along with his sister, who was actually a well-known artist in her own right. And he was the star pupil of Henry Tonks, one of the lecturers there. It almost makes me think of a pupil of that same name I had once. I wonder if he's a descendant of his. But anyway, I digress. Back to Augustus John. Incidentally, in Wales, having a Christian name as a surname, like Henry, or Edward, or George, or William, is not that unusual. So I don't think he spoke the Welsh language, actually, because Wales was going very Anglophone in those days, particularly South Wales. And he was fantastic at drawing, at painting, as a draftsman, also at etching. Before he even graduated, he was recognised as one of the foremost artists of his day. So he was always able to make a handsome living as an artist, which was no easy feat. Even gifted artists are often penniless. So he liked to travel a lot. And he travelled to France and Italy. Travelling further than that was beyond the budget of almost anyone, unless you're actually going to emigrate. So going around by train, obviously Italy being perhaps more artistically rich than anywhere else in the world. And from the train, he passed a town called Martigues in France, and he had a presentiment that this was somewhere he would find true happiness and endless artistic inspiration. So he later returned to it. It's near Arles, as in where Theo van Gogh spent some of the most productive years of his life. And when Augustus John went to Martigues, he found that his anticipation was fully fulfilled. He was delighted there, and he spent a lot of time there, visiting many summers, spending a couple of months. So he painted landscapes, he painted people, he travelled around the mountains of Wales with one of his chums. And then when it came to the First World War, he was made a war artist with the Canadian army serving in France. He requested the king's permission to still wear his beard, because British soldiers are almost never allowed to do that, and he was given this unique dispensation from shaving. So he and George V were the only soldiers in the British Army permitted to have a beard other than for medical reasons. Sometimes a soldier can't shave because he's got some sort of dermatological complaint and it would aggravate his skin. These days they're Sikhs in the British Army, very few, but they have an exemption for religious reasons. I'm not sure about any Muslims. There are very few Muslims in the British Army, and obviously not all Muslims do this. Well, not all Sikhs grow beards either. Anyway, so that was Augustus John, but he got himself into a bit of trouble with in the army, physically fighting some people, and was almost cashiered. But it was a fate he narrowly avoided. He was saved by Lord Beaverbrook, that Canadian newspaper magnate, the Aitken, who was a great admirer of his. So when he came back from the First World War, he really was famous throughout this country, and he was very much in demand as a portrait painter, painting perhaps the most celebrated portrait of T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, complete in his Bedouin robes. There's this gold-trimmed white thobe and that headdress. I'm not sure what you call it, gutra, I think. So Augustus John was married, he had children with his wife, and then had a long-term mistress, and they lived together in a menage a trois, had children with his mistress, Dora MacNeil, as well. He was fascinated by gypsies, and he befriended them at a time when a lot of sedentary people were very bigoted towards the Romani, and they were often the subjects of his artistic work. Later he was elected president of the Gypsy Law Society, took the liveliest interest in their folk tales. So he was a very bohemian character. It was a very different era, and it was very daring of him. He dived into the sea as a youth and hit his head on some rocks and sustained a quite serious head injury, although this seems to have had a positive effect on him, moved him in a new artistic direction, and made him ever more ebullient and genial. So you see, injuries can be a good thing. Well, I wouldn't recommend trying it because it could go very badly awry. What else about Augustus John? He wasn't fascinated by politics, despite it being near a political ferment. The First World War, pacifism. A lot of artists were left-wingers, were anti-war, drifted into socialism or even communism, but not he, and he had no truck with Welsh separatism. But in the 1950s, he changed again. He joined the Peace Pledge Union, refusing to fight under any circumstances, but he hadn't had such a view of the First World War or the Second World War, and indeed joined the Committee of 100, as in a principled opposition to the possession of nuclear weapons, wanting unilateral nuclear disarmament, wanting this realm to rid itself of nuclear arms, even if the Soviet Union did not. So he lived on till 1961. He died in Hampshire. I'm not sure where he's laid to rest. So that is Augustus John, who certainly had the artistic temperament, who was a notorious man for his galanterie, and people said that he'd sired over 100 wains, so I don't think that's true. All right, that's enough about Augustus John. Toodaloo.